Hello, welcome. All right, and so I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to take to watch the video from a previous semester, but I would highly recommend that you do so. Okay, because some things I won't speak about in the Zooms unless I'm asked, of course, on the assumption that you have heard that data, have been given that data in that video. All right. And so much of my class constitutes just being uh, faithful and committed to watching the videos and doing the argumentative assignments on time. And really, you could literally and should ace my class just doing that alone. All right. And sorry, this part is a little tedious, but there are quite a few of you, and I'm looking for your names on my sheet so I can give you your 5 points extra credit. What I'll do is I add it to this particular assignment. So you should be able to see your assignment should have 5 points added to it as a 50-point assignment. Okay. So going over that, the tests are an accumulation of what is covered in the argumentative assignments. And remember, you're only choosing one for each given assignment, but I have something from virtually every section on every assignment that is pertinent to at least one question on each test. So please read all of the sections, okay? Although you are only analyzing and evaluating one, all right? Let's see here. So as I'm going through here, are there any oh, you know what? I mean, what I try to do on my end, that's a great question, Valeria. On my end, you have an opportunity, right, with submissions to be pretty particular on the format. And I choose all available formats just in case, for that very reason, in case some do turn it in as PDF or just Microsoft Word, etc. If you could, I would recommend just keeping it in Microsoft Word. I know those work. And I will let you know immediately because every now and then someone will have it in a format in which I'm unable to open it. When I get to Speed Grader is my option and I see your assignments, I'll look and see your link and nothing pops up upon hitting the link. It'll even tell me it's unable to open. So then what I do is I give you an X as a temporary grade on your assignment, and I try to notify you via Canvas message, etc. And also in the message, I get to leave a message when I leave a grade, asking you with no penalty, of course, turn it in late to no problem, to turn it in to try another format. But if I were you, just to me, the safest one is Microsoft Word. All right. But sadly, after all this time of teaching, I should know that PDF works, and I don't. I only know when something doesn't work, and then I just notify the student and ask to turn it in again in another format in which I'm able to open it. All right. So yeah, and needless to say, you won't be penalized points on that, provided that you eventually turn it in a format that I could read. So that was a great question because that does come up. Oftentimes, at least 1 to 2 students per semester will send assignments in that I'm unable to open. All right, and so I wanted to go right to the assignment. So notice each of these, right, represents like a thought-provoking book that I've read, or a very opinionated professor that long ago I sat under and tried to make a some kind of subjective point. And so please keep that in mind when I put these together. They don't necessarily represent what I myself adhere to as a history instructor, but something that I thought was both thought provocative and also oftentimes common in historiography. Historiography is the art and science of history writing. And so, you have selection of facts, some that you select, some that you conveniently leave out because you have an undergirding opinion, thesis, axe to grind, etc. Then you have the interpretation of those facts. Some facts are interpreted differently by different people. And then you have the presentation of those facts, just as a simple acronym of what historians engage in and selecting, organizing, and presenting facts. So I'm just trying to get you to think critically, but also, so for those of you who are not history majors, I like to think that it's a little less boring than just simply giving you a simple narration of facts. Not only less boring, but I think more useful. I mean, how useful was that in your life, especially if your job has nothing to do with history? So I want it to be more universally pervasive, universally, what's the word I'm thinking of? Just relevant. And so then for the few of you who end up being history majors, I like to think I'm giving you an early step in what's to come. By the time I did grad school in history, that's when it got really fun. That's when we would have the same topic, and the professor would hand me a book written by a certain author that had a very strong slant in one direction, a strong opinion on that topic, and then he'd give another student sitting next to me a book that had a very contrary, oppositional view to mine, or just supplemental. And so then he would have us come and give a little précis of a little summary of the book that we had read, and that's what got me going and choosing this style of history, because I think that, like I said, it's more amenable to critical thinking. It's less boring. And for those who are going to be history majors, it's what is coming ahead as far as trying to defend and refute certain theses by certain authors. All right. So my titles give most of my thesis away. They really do. So ambiguity regarding Native American history, right? So then now let's switch to my response. Where's it's here somewhere. Pardon me. Come on, where are you? I know I opened it. There it is. All right. So see what I put together here. Section number 1 of the Native American handout states that modern science can, quote, only get us so far in formulating an historical narrative of what happened and when. The section begins by granting a concession to the oppositional argument that methods like carbon-14 dating, dendrochronology, thermoluminescence dating, stratigraphy, and isotope analysis shed light in forming an historical narrative. It then, however, pokes holes in such methods, showing their limitations and citing exceptional circumstances in which those methods will fail to yield definitive information. For instance, it states that dendrochronology will not work with, quote, complacent trees, that carbon-14 dating will not provide accurate chronology if the amount of C14 in the atmosphere has not remained constant. The primary piece of evidence used, however, is in refuting C. Vance Haynes' thesis of Native Americans migrating from the steppes of Asia just 13,000 years ago. And you'll see that they carbon dated certain artifacts in South America and Chile and Bolivia older than 13,000 years ago. and there's not much of a carbon footprint between the two glacial sheets known as the ice-free corridor. There's not a lot of evidence that people lived, ate, threw garbage away, cooked, killed, cleaned in that area. So then it says the writer cites his or her facts relatively faithfully. So notice analysis is pretty much a summation, right? What the main idea was in an example or two, argumentatively, factually, how that writer defended his or her argument. Then the evaluation is much more subjective. So there's a definitive answer I'm looking for in your analysis, right? I'm wanting you to have accurately discerned what I intended as the pervading thesis or argument of that section. All right. But with the second part, this is subjective. This is to each his own. The writer cites his or her facts relatively faithfully and uses examples in support of his or her thesis that science cannot provide a definitive historical record. Then I go on and say, however, the concession to the opposition seems conveniently limited, as there must exist plenty of hypotheses garnered from the aforementioned methods that have passed the test of time. Shouldn't we continue to work around such limitations of such methods rather than lose hope in them just because one scientist got it wrong concerning the arrival of Native Americans? So notice I was a little bit hard on myself and saying that, okay, granted, there's some evidence utilized in support of that claim, but does it really warrant completely, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and not giving any credence to these scientific methods just because a couple popular theories that those methods help devise have been refuted? All right. So feel free to disagree with the section's argument. Now, please, however, especially if you disagree, tell me why. Give me it doesn't have to be long, as you see in this sample, but even just in 2 or 3 sentences, but tell me why it precisely, how the argument could have been better supported. Maybe it's scant on data. Maybe it clearly omitted another facet of the topic, right? Etc. Tell me specifically why you may not find it to be very credible. Okay. So are there any questions on what I'm asking you? Because of 14 assignments, 12 of them are in this format. All right, I'm going to go back to the assignment. So number 2, historical investigation causes Native American stereotypes to crumble. So on the one hand, you're going to see what those stereotypes are, right? And you see them pretty quickly here. Bartolome de las Casas called Native Americans meek sheep. And Castillo, where's Castillo? Well, that seems to be the main one, but there's a man named Castillo who also, Castillo's written account depicting them instead as shrewd, deceitful, menacing, but sophisticated. But then I go on and say, but nevertheless, it was Columbus's and Las Casas depiction that prevailed in the popular Euro-American imagination, to look at the Native Americans condescendingly, like children, okay, like innocent children. Jean-Jacques Rousseau later on depicted them as noble savages. So then what I try to do is I set up that rationale and how it was very convenient, right, for justifying taking over the Native Americans, dispossessing them from their land and colonizing them. But then I say, upon further investigation, it was anything such. Firstly, that it was sparsely populated. There's evidence that it was very highly dense in population, the Americas, right? Then secondly, that their culture didn't go very far with cultural evolution. And that's another thing, you guys, that is very one-sided. It's very unfair, I say. But with Native Americans, right, they use the following criteria. And anthropology uses this to this day. How well do you and your culture manipulate the landscape? Leave some type of architectural major feats, right, for future generations to behold. Not to mention in manipulation of the landscape, do you farm? Have you begun farming? Because in so many cases, farming is a result of hybrid human agency, of taking two different strains of two grains, etc., and making the effort to make produce a food source. Capacity for large complex settlement. To what extent do you have, can you sustain large bodies of people with an array of classes, of socioeconomic echelons, right? So you have your priestly elite, you have your military, you have your artisans, your skilled workers, that is, you have your merchants, you have your daily laborers out in the field, you have your proletariat who work in the cities and engage in manual labor therein, etc. Right? Then also, do you have some type of literary, artistic, and scientific development going on? Europeans are looking for that. And so I think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? That when you're worried about your own survival, about getting sufficient food, about predatory animals, etc., you're not going to have time to sit around and write poetry. But once you become, economically stable and prosperous enough, then you can start looking to more ontological things, more things about why am I here? I want to enrich the human experience with culture, music and art, education of some sort, right? And knowledge of astronomy, etc. And then technological innovation pretty much speaks for itself. And then they look and see how far evolved religiously the natives are. And it's not just Christianity, but anthropology has a kind of hierarchy, right? And saying that, okay, the first initial primitive people were hunter-gatherers. And then when they became farmers and that they were atavistic, belief in the different in kind of pantheistic belief that there's a great spirit in all the animals and all trees, rocks, and inanimate objects, as well as living beings, and that they're all related through that spiritual link. And polytheistic, believing in many gods and spirits of rain, of the sun, of harvest, etc. And then you also have shamanism, a belief in the duality of the physical and the metaphysical or spiritual world, and that you have these spiritual middlemen, shamans, who engage in very common things such as self-abnegation. They fast, they sweat their toxins out, they do things to deny their bodily senses and urges, etc., to try to separate themselves from the world of the five senses. They engage in oftentimes something that helps translate their consciousness, which in many ways, in many areas of Native America, involve some hallucinogenic drug. And so, the anthropologists and as well as early modern Christians that came to colonize the Americas, they looked at that and said, oh, these guys are primitive. They're religiously primitive. And so, however fair or unfair that is. And so at any rate, those are kind of the barometers, the measuring sticks that we're using when we decide, how, quote, civilized were the Native Americans. And like I said, I don't think that's fair to judge Native Americans on such by the European standard. I certainly don't think it's fair to use such a barometer to decide if it will justify them or not in taking over the Americas and dispossessing the Native Americans. But it was what it was, sadly. And that's precisely what the Europeans and Euro Americans did. So I'm saying on this one, right, that, well, even if you want to use the European measuring stick, the Native Americans fared pretty darn well. And so take a look at the evidence for it. So of course, oftentimes the evidence, because it's most salient, it stands out the most, is in Mesoamerica, right? You have Teotihuacan, you had the Olmec before them, you had the Maya after them, and the Aztec after them. And so look at some examples of the manners by which those areas and those tribes were rather impressive according to those criteria that we just looked at on the PowerPoint. Then the narrative oftentimes goes chronologically first or next to the Southwest with the Pueblo natives. Just incredible system of farming by way of irrigation, incredible architecture. So take a look at that. Their knowledge of astronomy was very impressive. All right. Their trading links were very extensive. And then the argument goes to the Mississippian people along the Mississippi River, the, quote, mound cultures, for instance. And something should be mentioned of them as well, as far as having a complex, large population, grand earthworks, irrigated farming, etc. Extensive trade. All right. And look at my video, okay? And I go over the Algonquian people on the East Coast as well, and what impressed Euro Americans with them. And then number 3 says it all: native common traits that elicited harm. Now notice when I say this on number 3, I'm not saying that it was ethically okay. I'm not saying that it was fair. I'm not saying that it was justified. No way. Okay. But I'm just saying it is what it is. It was what it was. Is that because of certain commonalities, especially regarding religion and the absence of a notion of private property, that the Native Americans were stigmatized by Euro Americans as being primitive. All right. And notice the sources that we have. In addition to the scientific methods mentioned in number 1, we also have chronicles. Chronicles like Christopher Columbus's, his son, Bartolome de las Casas. The English and Dutch had several, depending on what region it was in. When Europeans came, they tried to learn the native dialects and learn about their history through, basically the equivalent of interviews, and sometimes like a anthropologist living amongst them for a while, and they would write chronicles of them. And you got to beware of the chronicles, right? Because a lot of people would contend that the Europeans were incapable, however good their intentions were, of truly giving an accurate portrayal of the Native Americans. And then sometimes even worse, they deliberately did not, because they had some kind of axe to grind. They had some type of purpose, a manipulative motive behind their writings of chronicles. And then, like I said, the two stereotypical things were, one was savages, very deceitful, dangerous savages. And I think of a guy named Castillo amongst the conquistadores, Bernal Diaz del Castillo. And so then within, of course, right, you literally had the Spanish and Portuguese, the Spanish in particular, declaring holy war, calling for holy war against the Aztec and other tribes, etc. And then you have the meek sheep. That's what Las Casas called them, ovejas mansas, meek sheep. And then you have, like the missions, the 21 missions in California. You have this kind of condescending paternalism, like, okay, you cute little children, we're going to be like your father figure, and we're going to tell you how to properly live and how to believe, and etc. And so those two could end up having dangerous consequences, those two images. From the natives themselves, what's really cool are the following, and I have this in the video, but let's see here. The stelae and the codices right here. So they had pictographic or hieroglyphic writings. It took as late as the 1970s to finally completely break the Mayan code. But it's very impressive. They have political top-down histories, especially in Mesoamerica, of kings, when they ruled, who they conquered, when they died, etc. The major events of the years, etc. Written on the stones or written in actual books known as codices. And the Spaniards are going to use young Aztec and Maya boys to translate them for them into Castilian Spanish, and from there into a myriad of European and other languages. From hence, we now have access to these codes. All right. But there is quite a bit of a scarcity of those types of codes here in present U.S. territory. So maybe this is the end right here. So you have three options to choose from, but please read all three, okay? Right. And like I said, if you could please, I take for granted I don't go into that much detail as for economy of time, to be honest. My semesters are so concentrated just in 6 or 7 weeks that I'm constantly grading and trying to twerk these assignments a little bit and so forth. And so since I've already gone into more detail on these videos, I count on you watching those, okay? So does anyone have any questions? So we're gonna rush, right? It's gonna be with our semester, it's gonna work out so that there will be, 2 assignments per week, then 3 assignments per week, then 2, and then 3. Yes, Audrey.
In regards to the homework, as far as like the sections that you're covering or you're telling us to read, are we supposed in like the analysis, do you want us to incorporate the information from like the videos that you just showed, or like the slideshow that you just showed?
You know what? That's a great question. I'm generous with extra credit points. And so if you incorporate stuff from a video, I'm very likely going to give you extra credit points. So it would be worth your while. Where it's going to really help you, Audrey, and in watching those videos is when you take test 2 and test 3. Because the first test, it's your first test. So I want to kind of spoon feed you because you're not accustomed to my style of writing a test up, right? How it's going to look and etc. But on test 2 and 3, I give very little help. I expect you by then to, to glean from my lecture videos and from my my assignments. And so I hope that answers your question, Audrey. And so like I said, with points on any given assignment, I'm likely going to give you a few extra credit points for utilizing or incorporating data that you had gleaned from my video. And then it's especially going to help you on test 2 and test 3.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. All right. So yeah, I tried to make it clear in modules, but also take a look at the syllabus to keep an eye out for due dates. But yeah, like I said, you have it oscillates 3 assignments a week, then 2, and then 3, and then 2, and so forth. So some a couple, 2 or 3 of the weeks, you're going to have an assignment due Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I apologize for that. I know when I first, and I'm also teaching another class at Delta. Thankfully, it's the same material, it's the same class. But theirs is even shorter than yours. It's 6 weeks. And so I am contractually obligated to cover, the number of subjects that we're covering. And so I consider myself not having a choice of having to do things. And theirs is consistently, their semester is every other day. Every other day something's due in their 6 week as opposed to your 7 week semester. But that loads me up with assignments to correct. So I ask you to please keep that in mind that and both your classes are 80 plus students. And I don't like to just glean over things. I really read your responses through, think about things, oftentimes write some type of response to you, as well as giving it a grade. And so please keep that in mind if I start falling a little behind and correcting things. But I always try to make an exception with the first assignment. I try to usually try to turn in that first assignment as quickly as possible so that you can get feedback immediately from me as far as how what I'm expecting and what I'm not on your responses. But I want to apologize. This may be exceptional with you guys because long ago, long before I was assigned this class, my family is going out of town for just this latter half of this week. And so please, I asked your understanding with that. All right. And so in fact, I will be out of town on the next on Thursday's Zoom, but I plan to do it from out of town. So it should be on as usual. But I just, you may end up having to, you very likely will have to end up submitting your second assignment before I could give you a response to your first. And for that, I greatly preemptively apologize. All right. But just like I said, just look at the video and look at my sample. I'm not asking the world as far as that which your analysis and evaluation. Just make sure you accurately discern what the main idea is. Give me an example or two of how I had defended it. And then just give me a brief evaluation as far as why you do or do not esteem that section to be credible, to be persuasive. And I'm sure you'll do fine.
Okay, got it.
All right, no problem. So thank you. Are there any other questions?
I don't have any questions right now myself, but if something pops up, I will be sure to ask you.
You got it. So, and then also remember, if you could primarily, I just, it's terrible, but I'm not as diligent as I should be with my emails, my standard emails. But I get on Canvas and I'm working on Canvas quite often. So it's easier to contact me via Canvas message than a regular, my standard email. And then also, especially with my family and I going out of town tomorrow for just 3 days, if you or 3 or 4 days, but at any rate, I also, if it's really important, I've also given you a cell phone number. And so you can feel free to text or call me if you start freaking out about something that that you are confused about. All right.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So can I get a thumbs up? You guys feel relatively informed, relatively prepared for that which is expected of you? Good, good. Thank you. Okay, good, good. All right. Audrey, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I know you just went over this, but I just like I need clarification again
Sure.
for myself. So essentially with the analysis, we're just picking one of those 3 topics and going over the information, right? You said the thesis and um, giving supporting details for that information, and then analyze and giving our evaluation of it, correct?
Perfect. That's
Okay.
right. So the analysis really isn't much different from a summary, right? You're showing me that you discern what the main idea was and how basically the main idea was supported by the writer. And then the evaluation is all you. Why you do or do not hold that thesis in that section to be credible or not. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Yeah, don't ever feel badly to ask questions, you guys. That's what I'm here for. That's my job. All right. So anybody else? Any other questions? So notice from the initial announcement that I gave you for the class, there's no textbook that's assigned. All right. I didn't contact if it had been a fall or spring semester, it probably would be different. I have a textbook that I like to use, but the semester is so short that I thought you guys are getting plenty of material from these argumentative assignments. And then I'm also having lecture videos, etc. And so, and then because I usually give quizzes on the textbook, and that's too much in a 7-week semester. You guys are already covering 14 topics and 3 tests in just 7 weeks. To me, that's enough.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So thank you. All right, you guys, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Okay. But barring some type of disaster out of town, I'm bringing my technology with me. I have 2 people who are better skilled than I with things technological. They're on the trip to help me. So I plan to see you still on Thursday afternoon.
Okay, Professor. I'm sorry. I just have one question.
Sure.
I don't know because I came in literally like a few minutes late, so I wasn't sure if and my Canvas is still not loading where I can see this class like on my Canvas portal, but because it would only, I contacted the office and they said it would be like a few hours until it actually does. But what days do we meet?
We meet, let's see, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 o'clock.
Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3. Okay, because thank you so much. But I should be able to see that whenever it loads. She said should take like 3 to 4 hours though before it actually hits my like Canvas portal.
Okay, good, good. Yeah,
I apologize.
no, don't apologize. It's that stuff almost inevitably happens. Literally at midnight, my password for Canvas, I guess, I don't know if it lapsed in time or whatever, but I literally logged in just before midnight. It was fine. I logged in just after midnight and it wouldn't work. And I've had students ask me for ad codes, and we're no longer receiving ad codes. We're told where to go as instructors to accept people's their application to be added. And by the way, may the class know, even though it costs me more work in grading, I don't say no. And so for any of you who are trying to add or still trying to do so, if you could do your best on your end, because I have no idea what you have to do on your end. I plan to call the division office and ask, just to be informed, so as to if someone has a question of me. But like I said, no longer ad codes. You do something on your end to be added, and then I just go to a certain site with a list of those petitions and can say yes to them. All right, so
Okay.
so yeah, I hope your Canvas is up and running pretty soon. All right. So any other questions? Anybody else? All right. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day, okay, if that's all right. And I have your names down. You'll get your extra credit points.
Actually, Professor, I had a question.
Yes, please.
For our quizzes and tests, will we be able to use like notes we take or anything like that? Or is
Yes.
it just no notes?
No, I mean, I have no way of enforcing it, to be honest. Yeah, you just go onto quizzes on Canvas and you take it. And by all means, if you wanted to print out and to use my argumentative assignments, like I said, you can glean a lot of answers from the argumentative assignments themselves. I mean, there's nothing I could do to stop that. But I'm okay with it anyway.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, so whatever you want to use as an aid while you take the test, I am certainly okay with that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. We had a nice turnout. A good number of you attend the Zoom, and I'm happy for that. Like I said, each time you do, I give you 5 points extra credit for doing such. But please, like I said, just take a look through my sample response and watch the videos if you could, because they will help you to be not only better informed with the assignments, but they'll certainly help you with the tests. All right, so have a nice day, everyone. Okay, I'll see you Thursday at 3.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
Thursday.
you.
Have a good day.
You as well.
Good
Bye-bye.
day.